Chapter 27. With both borrowed lines, Minli and the dragon continued their journey. Minli remade her compass with her rabbit rice bowl and followed the needle's pointed direction. As they traveled, the land became more barren, rocky, and steep. Without trees to tame it, the wind blew wildly, burning Minli's cheeks red with cold. The icy air shoved and pushed them, as if trying to keep them back. Late in the afternoon, after traveling up stony ground, Dragon made a noise. "Look up ahead," he said. Far ahead of them seemed to be a spot of bright yellow. Against the gray landscape, it seemed like a fallen piece of gold. "Is it a forest? Trees with yellow leaves?" Minli asked. Then she looked at the gray stone surrounding them. "But what trees could grow here?" "I think there is a village," Dragon said, squinting his eyes. "If there is, we can get you some warmer clothes." Even though the cold hadn't bothered the dragon, he had noticed her shivering. "We won't reach it before night," Minli said, "but I think there's a cave up ahead. Let's stay there for the night, and tomorrow we'll try to reach the village or whatever it is." The dragon agreed, and they made camp in the cave. The king's supply of traveling cakes saved her and Dragon from hunger, but Minli wished for the thick silk blanket. Even in the shelter of the cave, away from the wind, the earth was stark and cold. Minli built a fire as quickly as she could and sighed as its warmth slowly heated the air. But that night, Minli could not fall asleep. Even with the dragon snoring behind her, the fire crackling, and her blanket around her shoulders, her eyes did not close. Like the stone dust that the wind blew, thoughts kept circling in her head. She kept thinking about Ma and Ba and the orphaned buffalo boy. With pangs of guilt, she thought about how Ma and Ba pushed her to go home early from the field, how her rice bowl was always the first filled, how every night she went to sleep in her warm bed, she knew they were there, and how worried they must have been that now that she was not. The buffalo boy didn't have that. Instead, he had a dirt floor, a pile of grass for his bed, a muddy buffalo, and a secretive friend. Yet he turned away her copper coin and laughed in the sun. Minli couldn't quite understand it and somehow felt ashamed. But just as Minli shook her head with confusion, there was a sudden sound outside the cave. What was that? She cocked her head. There it was again, like a low grumble of thunder. Was it going to rain? Minli quietly got up and slipped out of the cave to see. But when she got outside, she screamed. The noise had not been the grumble of thunder. It had been the growl of a tiger. The giant tiger snarled and jumped right at Minli. Chapter 28. The wind screamed as Ma and Ba ate their dinner. The shutters of their house waved and slammed, shaking the house, and the light from their lantern wavered. They looked at each other and wordlessly went to the window. "There is fear in the wind," the fish said. "Great worry." "Is it a storm?" Ma asked. Ba looked at the fish. It stared at him with big eyes. "I am not sure," Ba said. The tree branches bent in the wind violently, as if they were being shaken by the sky. The wind shrieked again, and the cold air gusted into the house. The water in the fishbowl rippled, and the fish swayed in the bowl. Both Ma and Ba shivered. "Do you think Minli is out in this?" Ma faltered. "I hope not," Ba said. The wind continued to slap the house and the trees. The whole earth seemed to shudder at the screeching wind. Only the moon above was still. Ba looked at Ma and saw her soundless lips move as she gazed at the moon. He knew what she was doing and did the same. Please, he implored the moon silently. Please watch over Minli. Please keep her safe. The moon continued to shine. Chapter 29. Minli's scream seemed to freeze in the air. The tiger leapt at her, his scowling mouth glittering with pointed teeth, his blade-like claws rushing toward her. Minli knew there was no escape. But a flash of red violently knocked the attacking claw away. Minli gasped as Dragon roared, the tiger's claws ripping into his arm. With the brutal force of his other arm, the dragon threw the tiger back, forcing it to fly into the air. "Go away!" Dragon thundered, in a voice that even made Minli quake. She would have never imagined that Dragon could speak that way. The tiger glared like a spoiled child. Minli could now see that it was not an ordinary tiger. It was bigger than a horse or a buffalo, and it was a dark, dusty green like the color of sand dirtied from ocean foam. Even in the dim light of the moon, Minli could see its eyes glowing with malevolence. "Go!" Dragon commanded again. Minli realized she had forgotten how big Dragon was. The tiger was large, but Dragon was bigger. Though the viciousness of the tiger's expression made them seem evenly matched. But the tiger gave another mean snarl and turned away. Dragon stood his full height until even the tiger's moonlit shadow disappeared from view. "Are you all right?" Dragon finally asked. "That tiger," Minli said in a daze. "That tiger was going to get me." "I know," Dragon said. "That tiger is truly bad. When you screamed, I could feel it." And strangely, without knowing why, Minli burst into tears. The tiger's roars still echoed in her ears, and she could still see his cruel claws and eyes. Now that he was gone, her terror flooded out of her. "It's okay," Dragon said, gently putting his arm on her shoulders. It was then Minli saw 4 long gashes bleeding on Dragon's arm. The tiger's claws had been sharp, and the slashes were deep. Minli shook herself and brushed her tears away. "You're hurt," Minli said, looking at the cuts, which were already starting to swell. "It's all right," Dragon said. "Don't worry. Dragons heal quickly." They walked back into the cave, and Minli poured water on the wounds to clean them. She wrapped her blanket around Dragon's arm, but it continued to slowly bleed. As he lay down, Minli noticed Dragon's eyes fade and blur. "I'm starting to feel strange," Dragon said huskily. "Perhaps I will sleep." "Okay," Minli said. "You sleep. Maybe when you wake up you'll feel better." But Minli felt as if she had swallowed a frozen rock. Something was wrong with Dragon. She knew it. Throughout the night, his breathing grew hoarser and his skin was damp. Every time she unwrapped the blanket, she grimaced. The ugly wounds had turned black, and there was liquid starting to seep from them. Minli shivered, but it was not from the cold. "He's getting weaker," Minli thought. "Something is very wrong. I have to do something. Dragon needs help. But I don't want to leave him. What am I going to do?" By the time the first light of the sun crept into the cave, Dragon's breathing was rough. When Minli shook him, he didn't wake. Minli felt a surge of panic. I don't know what to do, she thought desperately. Her quick-thinking mind darted like a flustered butterfly. I know, she thought. I'll go to that village. Maybe someone there will know what to do. Minli stood up and whispered into Dragon's ear, I'm going to get help. I'll be back soon, I promise. Just hold on until then, okay? But Dragon didn't respond, and Minli felt tears start to form in her eyes. Quickly, without even gathering her things, she turned and left. It was mid-morning outside, and Minli squinted in the sun. The wind still blew bitterly, but she didn't even notice. Instead, Minli began to run toward the patch of yellow in the distance.